This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.
Aloha and welcome to the monthly public lecture of the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii. It's good to see all of you here tonight, especially in the bad traffic everybody's been having. The Vegetarian Society of Hawaii since 1990 has been following our mission of promoting human health, animal rights, and protection of the environment by means of vegetarian education as we've grown to become one of the largest nonprofit vegetarian societies in the nation. We'd like to encourage those of you who are not yet members, and even those of you who are not yet vegetarians, to join the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii tonight. Our members receive an informative newsletter, as well as discounts at grocery stores, such as Down to Earth, all vegetarian, organic, and natural, and many vegetarian and vegetarian-friendly restaurants, and may also be invited to participate in enjoyable social events. It's now time for our special guest. We're delighted to have with us tonight VSH's own Dr. Steve Blake. Dr. Blake has earned doctorates in holistic health and naturopathic medicine. His primary area of interest is in nutritional biochemistry. Dr. Blake is the author of the 2008 McGraw-Hill textbook, Vitamins and Minerals Demystified. He has just completed writing Understanding Dietary Fats and Oils, a scientific guide to their health effects. He is also the author of Healing Medicine, a complete guide to safer healing. He has created an extensive database on medicinal plant use around the world. Dr. Blake has also written the Diet Doctor 2011 software for graphing dietary nutrients. He is often heard on radio and seen on television, also offering classes at the University of Hawaii ViTech program. Dr. Blake has just returned from a speaking tour presenting the information you're about to hear tonight at teaching hospitals on the East Coast. He and his wife, Catherine Blake, are active in many vegan projects, both together and separately. Dr. Blake's presentation tonight is entitled A Nutritional Approach to Alzheimer's Disease. Please welcome Dr. Steve Blake.
Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you. Good job. That's what I call a Hawaiian welcome. Well, thank you for coming tonight. I come all the way from Maui, Hawaii, and it's nice to be in the big city. It's not a real fun topic to talk about Alzheimer's disease. I don't have really any jokes about it because it's a pretty serious situation. There are some drugs available for Alzheimer's disease, but speaking with the doctors, gerontology psychiatrists who deal directly with it, they're not satisfied with the drugs that they have. And I certainly don't think their drugs for Alzheimer's disease are very thrilling either. Basically, the drugs they use are cholinergic drugs, which inhibit cholinesterase. They make it so that the acetylcholine neurotransmitter, which is depleted in Alzheimer's disease as the entire brain is kind of shrunken and cooked, they allow a little bit more nerve transmission, but you have to be very careful with these drugs because donepezil is a classic example. It's most used. It's derived from a pesticide, a whole class of pesticides, organophosphates. And what these do to kill bugs is they create a situation where the acetylcholine continues to fire and activate the nerves more than once. Normally, the acetylcholine in that millionth of an inch gap between the nerves fires once and then is eaten up by something called acetylcholine esterase. It's an enzyme that eats up the neurotransmitter so you don't keep firing. Well, with a pesticide, it keeps firing until maybe the lungs freeze up and the animal, the insect, typically dies. But with donepezil, if they can keep the dose just a little bit, it helps a little bit with thinking. But the side effects are awful. And you can see on the screen, the Alzheimer's Association says that there is no treatment that can improve memory, that can reverse or stop the progression and the degeneration of Alzheimer's disease. This is true of drugs. The drugs do not stop the progression of Alzheimer's disease. However, at the end of this talk, I'd like you to think about whether or not there are any treatments that can perhaps delay, stop, or even reverse the progress of Alzheimer's disease. And this talk will be based upon medical studies, peer-reviewed clinical studies, and nothing else. This is a picture of an Alzheimer's brain, the shrunken one there. The color is from a PET scan that shows glucose activity. Whenever your brain is metabolizing, is working, it uses glucose. And so you can see that in a normal brain, there's a lot of color, there's a lot of activity. Whereas in an Alzheimer's brain, there's very little. This is an advanced case of Alzheimer's, and at this point, there's nothing that anyone can do. So we really need to catch it a little bit sooner than that. Now, the big problem with Alzheimer's disease is these amyloid plaques. They're called amyloid plaques or beta amyloid plaques, and move the mouse here to show you where it is. These are like little fuzzballs that get stuck in the brain, and a few won't bother you because our brain has 100 billion nerve cells with 100 trillion connections. But as they build up, and if they build up too much, then they start interrupting the nerve transmission. And as you'll find out in this talk, they also harbor advanced glycation end products that continuously generate free radicals and low-level inflammation that cause terrible irritation and eventually destruction of the nerves in the brain. There's two signature features of Alzheimer's disease. The first one I just showed you is these little fuzzy globs of protein called amyloid beta plaques. The amyloid beta is a peptide, a protein fragment that's typically 40 to 42 amino acids long. In this, we show you that those are external to the nerve cells in the brain. Inside the nerve cells of the brain, they also get ruined in Alzheimer's disease. The bottom one looks like a fried egg, doesn't it? It's literally that the nerve cells are getting fried by free radical activity in the brain. The tau protein gets phosphorylated is a more complex way to say that. And in a normal brain, these phosphorylated tau proteins are able to be broken down by proteolytic enzymes and removed. But in an Alzheimer's situation, you get a buildup of this too. So these are the two signature features, and these are what we're going to try to stop happening in our brains. Here's a scary graph. That red line shows you the incidence of Alzheimer's disease between 1979 and 2007. In 2006, diabetes was the leading number 6 cause of death. But in 2007, Alzheimer's disease became the number 6 cause of death. And this is not cause of illness, this is cause of death. And many people don't quite understand that it's quite deadly. And that typically when you're diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, the average time is maybe 7 years. And those 7 years aren't pretty. Those 7 years account for a tremendous burden. The caretakers often die before the people with Alzheimer's because it's such an awful thing to watch a loved one go down in that fashion. Wonder what's caused this dramatic rise? Well, a little bit of the dramatic rise is because of better reporting, especially at the beginning of the curve there. But we do see that Alzheimer's disease is an epidemic. And my studies indicate that it is an epidemic brought on by food. Now, during the talk, I've got 4 major sections and then some other parts to it. The first thing that increases your risk of Alzheimer's disease is a diet low in 2 B vitamins. That's vitamin B12, cobalamin, and folate. Folate is the form in food, and folic acid you may have heard of in supplements. These 2 B vitamins, I'll show you, are crucial for stopping the formation of amyloid plaques and tau tangles. And it's really quite easy to do. You eat some green vegetables, some maybe nuts and seeds or beans. This is easy, good advice in any case. And this really helps. And with B12, you may need to take a sublingual B12 vitamin supplement. Has anyone heard of advanced glycation end products in the crowd? Okay, we have only 2 people. Well, it's a good thing I'm here tonight because I think these are very important. Advanced glycation end products are deformed proteins. They're proteins that have been twisted, polymerized, cross-linked. Advanced glycation end product proteins are impossible for our bodies to dissolve, or any chemical that I know of or have ever heard of. Once they're in your body, they're there to stay. And the acronym AGE is really appropriate for them. They cause aging. They also cause the damage in diabetes to the kidneys and the arteries. And they also cause the damage to the brain in Alzheimer's disease. So I'll be telling you a little bit more about AGEs during this talk. And of course, we've all heard of antioxidants. And I did write a book for McGraw-Hill in 2008 called Vitamins and Minerals Demystified. And in this book, I look specifically at the micronutrients that are essential for health, and many of these are antioxidants. The beta-carotene form of vitamin A, the vitamin E family of tocopherols, and vitamin C, of course. There are more that I'll tell you about tonight. 2 forms of antioxidants will be discussed, those we get in our diet and those we create in our body. When you look at dementia entirely, you see that 3/4 of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. But what about the other quarter? Well, a large part of that is vascular dementia, and that means that the arteries in the brain are as clogged up as the arteries in the rest of a typical American's body, starting at somewhere between age 2 and 8. Our arteries get clogged up, and this is principally from our intake of animal foods. In Alzheimer's disease, there's usually, if not always, a component of vascular disease. So that if you do exercise, which really doesn't help get the amyloid plaques out of your brain, then that will help your vasculature, and it might even burn up a little bit of the extra fats in your blood. So it'll help a little bit with Alzheimer's disease, but not too much. But it helps a lot with vascular dementia. So these are the 4 sections of my talk tonight. What you can do is eat green vegetables for folate and take a sublingual vitamin B12. This will raise the levels of a chemical known as S-adenosyl methionine, or for short SAMe. And it also will lower a chemical called homocysteine. Now, some of you have heard of homocysteine. Homocysteine is a risk factor for heart disease, and it also is a huge risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. You'd want to avoid foods that have advanced glycation end products, and bacon heads up the list there. You also want to avoid making advanced glycation end products inside your body, which is done when you have an excess of sugars in your blood. I'm sure that we've all seen these giant Slurpee drinks with tons of sugar in them. Something like that, where your blood sugar, and especially in your brain, is loaded with sugar, will actually create these advanced glycation end products in your brain. And of course, they also are created all throughout the bloodstream when you have hyperglycemia or high blood sugar. Eat plenty of fruits and vegetables, always good advice. We have an abundance here in Hawaii. And avoid animal fats because they clog arteries. These are the main things you can do. Now, I'll be showing you medical studies during the talk tonight that talk about whether or not vitamin E should be taken in the diet or in supplements. Vitamin C should be taken in the diet or possibly in supplements. Whether or not you should consider coenzyme QA as the only fat-soluble antioxidant made in the human body. And some people cannot make their coenzyme Q10, which is very important. And then there's that SAMe, the S-adenosyl methionine. That can be taken as a supplement. Now, it may sound controversial that I'm going to mention 3 medical plants here, and yet I'll show you studies that have been done on these plants and let you decide whether you think they're valuable or not. I think it's very important for you to understand how these amyloid plaques get made. Okay, if you want to avoid Alzheimer's disease, then you want to avoid the plaques that are built up. And I'm going to move my mouse here. There are 2 secretase enzymes here inside the cell. Then they have the cell membrane here. In the cell membrane, we have some amyloid precursor proteins stuck in the membrane. Now, when these secretase enzymes are active, they can snip this protein off and send that protein off out to make these plaques. If there are less secretase enzymes, there is less amyloid beta created and less amyloid beta plaques in the brain and less memory loss, less dementia, less Alzheimer's disease specifically. So during this talk, we're going to think about ways that we can reduce the activity of these secretase enzymes. Low levels of the two B vitamins, folate and B12, cause an excess of homocysteine in the blood system. Now, whenever there's an excess of homocysteine in the blood system, those two secretase enzymes, I'll go back a slide, they are increased. Now, genetically, some people have a predisposition to also have too many secretase enzymes. However, this effect is minor compared to the effect of having too much blood homocysteine. When you have too much homocysteine, you're going to make a lot more of the secretase enzymes and therefore a lot more of the plaque. So you want to keep your homocysteine down. How do you do it? Very simple. Green leafy vegetables, nuts and seeds and beans, those all have plenty of folate. And then B12 comes in two forms, either animal products or pills. Here's another chart of how amyloid beta creation is fostered. When your body detoxifies homocysteine, it can make it into methionine, and then the methionine can further be changed into this SAMe. Now, SAMe's effect on the secretase enzymes, it quenches them. SAMe it methylates the DNA in the cell to quench the genes that make the secretase enzymes, and thus you don't create more amyloid plaque. Does that make sense to everyone? So we have two different blood chemicals. Homocysteine, more of that gives you more amyloid plaque. S-adenosylmethionine, more of that makes less amyloid plaque. How to figure it out? Go to your produce shelf and eat lots of green leafy vegetables. They have tons of great nutrients besides this effect here. Now, I'm going to be talking about studies. This one's from the Archives of Neurology. And they looked at people with Alzheimer's disease, and they looked to see, do they have elevated homocysteine? Okay, we have a mechanism that I've outlined for you. Now, does it bear out? Yes, 4 times as likely to have elevated homocysteine. And, in fact, those with Alzheimer's disease were 3 times as likely to have low folate levels. Here's another study from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2004. High levels of homocysteine quadrupled the risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. This is another way to look at science. You can say, well, if these people had lower homocysteine, did they have less Alzheimer's disease? Yes. If they had higher homocysteine, did they have more Alzheimer's? Yes, they did. They found that low levels of folate tripled the risk of vascular dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and they tied in cognitive scoring. So in a lot of cases, the easiest test for Alzheimer's disease is called a mini mental state exam. You can Google that and download a little sample test, and you can administer that to each other, and you get 30 points maximum, and it's really easy. It's very simple, like things like what did you have for breakfast, this type of thing. So you should be able to score in the high 20s. And so this is one way to kind of check your cognition, and this is one way that there are several of these tests that clinical workers use. And they found that the test results were better if people had higher folate and lower homocysteine. One more thing about homocysteine, higher levels of homocysteine were associated also with the accumulation of this hyperphosphorylated tau, or tau tangles as they're called. So both signature features of Alzheimer's disease are involved in these two nutrients. So from these studies, we can estimate that those who have enough dietary folate and B12 run about 1/4 the risk of people who do not. Sounds good to me. Now, do you get enough folate? Over here, we have a little diagram from my Diet Doctor software. I have a software program where you input what you ate in a day, and it graphs for you these invisible nutrients and shows you not just folate, of course, but protein and calcium and all the fatty acids and all that sort of thing. And you see a little graph here on the right, folate levels in an American diet. Now, this is the RDA, this tall bar here, and this is the amount of folate found on a typical American diet. Pretty deficient. So if you're wondering if some people don't get enough folate and that might contribute to their Alzheimer's disease, yes. The big chart shows you some of the best sources, and well, spinach is a great source. Nuts and seeds and beans and so on are all real good. What about B12? When we find a clinical deficiency of vitamin B12, it's often in people who get lots of vitamin B12 in their diet. Well, why don't they have it in their bloodstream? Because cobalamin's a huge molecule. It's hard to digest, has to be broken from its protein carriers in the stomach. You have to have intrinsic factor made in your stomach. They both go in the intestines and are absorbed if a special transport protein is available, and if the stomach lining is healthy, if the enterocytes and the mucosa inside the stomach are healthy. But almost by definition, people who eat enough B12 are eating animal products with zero fiber, and they're probably in trouble in their digestive system. So my suggestion is that all of us take a sublingual B12. Now, sublingual means under the tongue, it absorbs into your bloodstream directly. So you don't have to worry, is it getting in or is it not getting in? Here's a diet comparison. I did this with my diet doctor, and it's lots of fun. On the SAD diet, the standard American diet, you can see you got 175 micrograms of folate. Not enough. 400 is the real minimum. All of the red ones are deficient in folate. And so you can see the South Beach, the Zone, many of these are deficient in folate. Any diet that has lots of green leafies, nuts and seeds and beans is going to be abundant. Look at those raw food vegans at the bottom. They had a huge amount of folate. Okay, now I have a picture of the chemical structure of Sammy here, and I also have a picture of Sammy Davis Jr. You can look at whichever one attracts you more, but I just thought he's a lot of fun. And I know I'm throwing a lot of big words at you, so I want you to relax once in a while. SAMe is the one that you can build up when you get enough folate and B12. So it's a good idea to keep your levels high. I was just telling you that the enzymes that create amyloid beta plaques are quenched. They're methylated by SAMe. So it's a good idea to have your body make that SAMe with those 2 B vitamins, and you could even consider taking SAMe directly. Now, this study in the Journal of Neuroscience says lack of SAMe or excess of homocysteine also created these tau tangles. So they're causing both things. So high homocysteine causes it, low SAMe causes it. Any way you look at it, you've got to keep these 2 things balanced, and it's really not hard at all. They looked at the level of SAMe in cerebrospinal fluid from Alzheimer's disease, and they found that it was severely low in all brain regions of Alzheimer's disease patients. So this is a really close tie-in. It's a prescription drug in some countries. It's over the counter in America. It's often taken for depression, and it will give you a Prozac smile. You should take it only in the morning, and if you're taking any serotogenic drugs of any kind, such as Prozac, Xanthax, or any of those, you want to consult with your doctor and see if there are going to be drug interactions, because it's quite likely with this particular thing. It's also widely used for arthritis. Studies have shown that SAMe reduces arthritis pain as much as painkillers with all of their side effects, but SAMe is well tolerated and without side effects, except perhaps for keeping you up if you take it late in the day or interfering with drugs. Now, we've done with folate and vitamin B12, and I hope you all make sure you get lots of them. And I see someone shaking his head at advanced glycation end products. We have some foods up here that in the next slide I'll show you a chart of these foods and how much of the advanced glycation end products they have in them. Bacon wins the day. Here's a chart of them. You'll also see a comparison of smooth baby skin with old wrinkled skin. The difference? Advanced glycation end products that have been built up in the collagen tissue. I notice that sometimes people aren't completely happy to change their diet and their ways for health, but for beauty, now that's something else. So there's 2 sources. They can be formed in the blood when they're elevated levels of glucose and formed in the brain, or they can be formed in food when it's cooked at high temperatures without the presence of water. I investigated carefully if these AGEs can be taken into the bloodstream from food, because they are peptides, and as it seems likely, it turns out that only the shorter peptides that are advanced glycation end products, remember these are cross-linked and polymerized proteins, they are actually absorbed, and studies show that they do go up in the blood, in fact double in the blood, more than double, after a meal high in advanced glycation end products. So they also, once they're in the bloodstream, are guaranteed to get into the brain because we have receptors called RAGE, receptor for advanced glycation end products, that help cross the blood-brain barrier with these. They not only cross the blood-brain barrier, but simply activating RAGE causes a cascade of inflammation in the brain. So these are things to be avoided in the food, if at all possible. Now here's a study from Free Radical Biology and Medicine, and this is a 2001 study, and their findings emphasize the importance of AGE through oxidative stress, as in free radical damage, in the pathogenesis of Alzheimer's disease. In other words, it causes Alzheimer's disease. Actually, it causes the damage from Alzheimer's disease. Once the plaques are formed, then there's a place for the AGEs outside of the cells to lodge and do that. They're looking at this as an integral part of the formation of Alzheimer's disease. By the way, I have a research report that on our table. I've got a few copies of this. If some of you are taking assiduous notes, you might want to get this. Just reimburse us for printing. And my wife has a few on the back table. Now, this is a really interesting study. It was published in the Kuwait Medical Journal. I mean, how many people here are regular readers of the Kuwait Medical Journal? But I'm telling you, it's one of the best articles I've ever read, a review article on advanced glycation end products. If you have medical nomenclature, then you might want to read this study. AGEs were 3 times as high in the brains of Alzheimer's patients, and they were found specifically in the amyloid plaques and the tau tangles. Can we, in fact, reduce our risk by about 1/3 by cutting the AGEs out of our diet? Perhaps. If you wanted to eat the same foods you're eating now, but get half the advanced glycation end products, all you need to do is change cooking methods. If you cook with the presence of water, they don't form. It interferes with this initial locking of the molecules. There are Schiff bases and amyloid products and all kinds of complicated things that go on when these are being formed in food. And it's fascinating. I mean, they're not really found much in milk at all, but when you age it as cheese, it's one of the highest amounts of AGEs you can find in any food. Now, I've talked about AGEs, and I talked about folate and B12 and their relation with homocysteine and SAMe. Now I want to talk about antioxidants and free radicals. Every cell in our bodies, every day, suffers an estimated 10,000 attacks by free radicals. Now, free radicals basically damage our cells. Some parts of our cells are more prone, more susceptible to damage. The neurons in the brain have a lot of DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, which is a very long-chain, very fragile fatty acid that is very susceptible to damage by these free radicals. So we need that protected. And does anyone know the nutrient that protects this very fragile fatty acid and the phospholipids of our brain neurons? Vitamin E. That's about the only thing that can. It has to be fat soluble. It has to, with the vitamin E's, the little legs have to penetrate. It has 2, fatty legs that stick into the membrane, the fatty area. If they find a free radical, they pull it up to the head and neutralize it, and then a vitamin C will come floating along and recharge the vitamin E so it can keep doing that continuously. Any medical studies you see with vitamin E that don't also include vitamin C show only an ignorance of the study designers, not really anything, such as a study that came out within the last week showing that vitamin E supplements increase the risk of prostate cancer. This was done, first of all, not really with vitamin E, but the all-racemic form of alpha-tocopherol. Vitamin E is a family of 4 tocopherols, and I'll show you how important they all are. I want you to know what causes free radicals. 2 of them are unavoidable. Aging and exercise or any metabolism causes a few free radicals to be formed. We can easily deal with those. Radiation varies how much you get. I guess if you visit Fukushima right now, it would be real bad. Medical testing can expose you to radiation. Dental X-ray exposes you to a very small amount that would increase your risk of cancer almost infinitesimally. A chest X-ray will increase your risk a little bit. To a child, it would increase his risk more. These risks have been quantified. If you move on to a mammogram, then you have a significant increase in risk of cancer, breast cancer in this case. And if you move on to a CAT scan, you have a huge dose of radiation that will create a cascade of free radicals inside your body. If the CAT scan is of your brain, you'll have a huge cascade of free radicals in your brain. This may be necessary. If it's necessary, you should do it. If it's not necessary or is a duplicate test for some bureaucratic reason, then you should be careful with them. Fried foods, chemical pollution, cigarette smoke doubles your risk of Alzheimer's disease, by the way. Stress and alcohol all increase your free radicals. Now, here are the basic antioxidants. We have beta-carotene, vitamin E, vitamin C, and plant polyphenols, and some other plant constituents. These are the ones that come from outside your body that quench free radicals inside your body. Vitamin E, very controversial as a supplement, however, always proven to be effective in food. Sunflowers are one of the richest sources of vitamin E. Now, this study, there's actually two studies represented here, one by Sano, where he gave people twice the upper limit of vitamin E. The upper limit's 1,000 IUs. He gave them 2,000 IUs. And he found that vitamin E is effective in improving the cognitive performance in Alzheimer's disease patients. This is a very controversial result because many people are saying, well, how can that possibly be? Well, let's examine this a little bit further. This is from the Journal of the American Medical Association, and it's a 2002 study. They followed 800 elders. They followed them for 4 years, and vitamin E in food lowered the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease by 2/3, 67%. That's a nice lowering of risk. They observed a protective association between vitamin E intake from food and from supplements, slowed or stopped the decline over 3 years in cognitive function. Well, this is hopeful, isn't it? Oh, this is from the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease. The beta-tocopherol form of vitamin E was effective in cutting risk in half, and many studies are wrongly done with the alpha-tocopherol form. Furthermore, they used the synthetic alpha-tocopherol form. And the synthetic alpha-tocopherol form is made up of 8 different isomers of alpha-tocopherol. Only one is the natural one. So to give you an analogy, people are saying, oh, vitamin E causes prostate cancer, okay? But is it really vitamin E? What if it was a car and you had 8 cylinders and the alpha-tocopherol was the motor and the beta-tocopherol was the body and the gamma-tocopherol were the wheels and the delta-tocopherol was, the bumpers? Well, what if only one of the cylinders was functioning properly and you only had an engine? Would you call that a car? No. I don't think so. You'd call it an engine that ran on one cylinder. Well, all racemic vitamin E, the synthetic form that they use in so many of these studies, is defective in 2 ways. First of all, it's only the alpha-tocopherol, and second of all, it's a synthetic alpha-tocopherol that bears little resemblance. Only 12.5% of it is actually real vitamin E, and then only a small fraction of it. All this is covered in some detail in my book from McGraw-Hill on vitamins and minerals. Now, here's another study from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Their conclusion was that various tocopherol forms rather than alpha-tocopherol alone may be important in the vitamin E protective association with Alzheimer's disease. So when they mix the different tocopherols, like it is in food, by the way, American food, you get more gamma-tocopherol than alpha-tocopherol. So if you're going to mimic food, you would want to make a supplement with more gamma-tocopherol rather than just alpha. It's interesting because gamma-tocopherol helps the blood deagglutinize and go through thin capillaries. And in the brain, when you're trying to think, you need the blood to go through those thin capillaries. Well, if it's clumped up and can't go through, alpha-tocopherol won't help you, but gamma-tocopherol will. Just an aside there I think is important. So the vitamin E, of course, lowered lipid peroxidation. That's how they say free radical damage to membranes. And it also pumped up the superoxide dismutase, which I'll tell you in a minute a little more about superoxide dismutase. It protects us from the inside. So the effects of alpha-tocopherol alone are really not enough. So if any of you are taking alpha-tocopherol or synthetic alpha-tocopherol as a form of vitamin E, I wouldn't recommend it at all. I would not think that that would be helpful. It's probably somewhat neutral in its effects if you look at the vast number of studies. This study found that gamma-tocopherol was found to be more effective in scavenging free radicals. And the use of alpha-tocopherol supplements significantly reduced serum gamma-tocopherol. So you see, if you take alpha, it lowers your gamma that you got from food. That's not a good thing. Where do you get it? Well, if you eat salmon, do you get it? No. And that's a shame because salmon has a lot of very fragile fatty acids. And those fatty acids need protection in our bodies from free radical damage. Why don't they need it in the salmon's body? Because they're in cold water, and that greatly inhibits free radical action. But in our bodies, they really need it. So all of the animal foods are deficient in vitamin E, and nuts and seeds are great sources. Avocados have a nice little amount, too. My favorite vitamin E pills here look like almonds. In fact, they are almonds. And sunflower seeds are an excellent way to take them, but instead of swallowing them whole like other pills, you chew them up or grind them or blend them. Now, vitamin C in itself isn't such a great inhibitor of Alzheimer's disease unless it gets to work with vitamin E. But they did notice that a dementia group were 3 times more likely to have low plasma vitamin C levels than healthy people. And a higher plasma vitamin C level was associated with better cognition. This makes you smarter. That's nice. Now, they studied 633 elders, and rarely in medical studies do you see that none of the 27 vitamin E supplement users had Alzheimer's disease over the period of time. They predicted 4 would, but none of them did. And with vitamin C use, they predicted that 3 would, and none of them did. So that makes me think this was a very well done study, and it's from Alzheimer's Disease and Associated Disorders Journal, which is a very distinguished journal. It's peer-reviewed. Now, here's a Honolulu Asian study of over 3,000 elder men. Now, men who reported taking both vitamin E and C supplements had 1/8 the risk of developing dementia. Again, because of a problem that was alpha-tocopherol in a synthetic form, it didn't really suppress Alzheimer's disease much in this study. But it still reduced dementia by 1/8, 8 times. That's a big effect. Here's another study showing that vitamin C and E in supplements together lowered Alzheimer's disease by 25%. Where do you find vitamin C? Fruits and vegetables. That's where you find it. Pretty much all the fruits and vegetables are great. Oranges win on this slide. It's a diagram from my vitamins and minerals book. Now, what about antioxidants in diets? All the red vitamin E's are deficient. They don't even make the extremely low 15 milligrams per day, which equates to 22.5 IUs. They don't even make that. And really, we need more than 15. 15 is a bare minimum. So you can see the standard American diet, the Atkins diet, the McDougall diet, the Zone diet, the Paleo diet, the South Beach diet, the transition vegetarian diet. Now, I do want to mention that you can have a vegetarian diet that's not very healthy. If, for instance, you decide, I'm not going to eat any animals anymore, but you're going to eat a lot of eggs and cheese and white flour products and not enough vegetables and beans and nuts and seeds and fruit, then your diet can be every bit as bad as a standard American diet. So it's not enough that you just think to go vegetarian or even vegan. There are also junk food vegan diets. After all, donuts and Pepsi Cola are vegan, right? So plant polyphenols are an easy way. Now, a study just came out looking at over 3,100 foods, supplements, herbs, berries, and this study is unique in the history of medical research because they used the same analysis for all of these foods so we could compare them directly. And this is fun stuff. What won was a vitamin C supplement from Costco. It had the most antioxidant activity of anything that they studied. Interesting, isn't it? Vitamin C is a very powerful antioxidant in any form. This form that they studied was not a preferred form of vitamin C that I would normally choose, and yet it beat everything. Triphala powder, an Ayurvedic formula, had a very high amount of antioxidant action. Amla berries, bearberries, any berries are great. Any kind of berries you can get in your diet are really good for you. Blueberries or blackberries or raspberries, anything. They're all really good. Once you get below berries, walnuts have a nice antioxidant potential by and large because of their vitamin E content, which is quite high. Below that, you start getting to foods that are just not very high. And you see down the list there, red wine that is so touted for its antioxidant potential. Well, yeah, it's got a little bit, but not too impressive compared with the heavy hitters. And the little box there shows you foods that have virtually no antioxidant activity at all. Big surprise, it's all the animal foods. Not really surprising at all. Since they have no vitamin C and no vitamin E and no beta-carotene, how could they be antioxidant? Grape juice, berries, and walnuts help with Alzheimer's disease. So if you don't want to change anything about your diet at all, except maybe you could drink some grape juice, eat some berries, and have a few walnuts, it's still going to improve your health dramatically and even lower your chances of Alzheimer's disease. Now, here's a study from the British Journal of Nutrition, a nicely done study that says Concord grape juice contains polyphenol compounds which have antioxidant, anti-inflammatory properties. They do. Now, we've looked at antioxidants you take from the outside in. What about the ones made in your body? Superoxide dismutase, glutathione peroxidase, and coenzyme Q10. These are the three that are made in your body. Now, all three of these have an ACE on the end. That means they're enzymes. And enzymes only work with a mineral cofactor. No mineral cofactor, they don't work. So you need it. What do you need? For superoxide dismutase, you're going to need manganese for the most crucial one to protect your mitochondria, and zinc and copper. Glutathione peroxidase, you need selenium, and coenzyme Q10, you just need to not be on statins. Statins inhibit the production of coenzyme Q10. So if you're wondering if everyone gets enough manganese, here's my diet doctor analysis of manganese on a Atkins diet. Almost nothing. The big bar shows the amount that you should get in a day, and the little bar shows the amount on a typical Atkins diet from his website. I will say that manganese is a trace mineral. Too much is not good. Too little is not good. You need just the right amount. There's a mitochondria on top that's been kind of cooked. Now, these are the little energy factories in our bodies, and during Alzheimer's disease, they get cooked by free radical damage. To stop this, you need, first of all, to stop the amyloid plaques from building up. You need to stop the AGEs from getting implanted in them and generating the free radicals, extra ones. And then you need antioxidants in the diet and in your body in order to quench them. Selenium is an interesting one. Selenium is a cofactor for glutathione peroxidase, and selenium was found to be significantly lower in Alzheimer's disease patients because the selenium was used up. It was used up in detoxifying these free radicals and neutralizing them. Now, coenzyme Q10 is the number 3 best-selling supplement. Number 1 is vitamin C. Good sources include soybeans, peanuts, pistachio nuts, and olives, but you should be making it inside your body. And this is done in the same pathway that you make cholesterol in your body. Our data suggests that coenzyme Q10 would be a potentially useful drug for the therapy of Alzheimer's disease. Journal of Molecular Neuroscience, 2005. In fact, when I went to the McLean Hospital to give the same talk to the doctors and staff, they had 2 studies running on coenzyme Q10 to see if it would help with Alzheimer's disease, and they were already getting good results. However, their approach was to just use coenzyme Q10, where my approach is more holistic, and I would rather that you used a broad spectrum of good health habits to further lower your risk of Alzheimer's disease. Now, here's a typical antioxidant diet. Lots of fruits and vegetables, maybe some beans. A few nuts and seeds are crucial to get the vitamin E that we all need, and that's really the best source of them. And whole grains, if you're going to eat grains, they really need to be whole. Now, this study was done to look at how the different diets compare. And if you look at it, not just one nutrient now, they're looking at a whole diet, and that's what I like. That's what I like to do, is look at a whole person's diet. They found a diet rich in vegetables, fruit, and nuts with high levels of vitamin E and folate was strongly protective. They found that high levels of saturated fat in the diet greatly increase risk. Now, what foods are saturated fats found in? Anyone going to say the word? Animal products. Yeah, they're also found in coconuts, but pretty much saturated fats means animal products in most American diets. Animal products double your risk of Alzheimer's disease. I know that some people find them tasty, but it does double your risk. And you can see this artery up on the screen. And this artery shows that it's mostly plugged up with atherosclerotic plaque. And this is caused by eating saturated fats in the diet. I figure that's about 75% of the cause. I wrote a book last year. It's called Understanding Dietary Fats and Oils, and Scientific Guide to Their Health Effects. I just actually received confirmation that it's going to be published. Right now, this book is up on my website for free. So if any of you are interested in dietary fats and oils, and you want a good objective analysis of trans fats or saturated fats or essential fats or even eicosanoids, or creating the eicosanoid precursors in your body, I encourage you to download it before my publisher makes me take it off. So that's on my website, naturalhealthwizards.com. Wizards is plural. Now, what about high blood cholesterol? Does that affect your chances of getting Alzheimer's disease? A large Finnish study spanning many decades found that people with elevated blood cholesterol at midlife were 3 times as likely to get Alzheimer's disease. Nutritional studies are notoriously difficult and unreliable. So we have to think that these people who had elevated cholesterol in midlife were probably eating lots of animal products, which means they probably weren't eating their vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds. So that's really why they got the double whammy and got Alzheimer's disease. High levels of HDL, the good cholesterol transporter, actually cut the risk of Alzheimer's disease in half. This is really interesting to me, to find a mechanism for this. When you have high blood cholesterol, those 2 secretase enzymes that snip off the amyloid precursor protein and make amyloid plaques are encouraged. And when you have low normal levels of blood cholesterol, then they would be discouraged. We produce cholesterol when we have too much food, basically. Saturated fats or sugars or anything will get transformed into our body into 2 carbon fragments called acetyls, and then they'll be built up into palmitic acid, and this encourages cholesterol production mightily. Okay, now some fun with medical plants. Now, in medical studies, the gold standard is placebo-controlled, double-blind, randomized studies. This way no one can cheat. Okay, the studies have to be right. Well, this is a meta-study that looked at 9 studies that meet these criteria, and they found that ginkgo biloba, this plant pictured here, helped both in delaying the onset of Alzheimer's disease and in treating it. In other words, these studies, these 9 studies looked at collectively, showed that there is a way to treat Alzheimer's disease. Substantial evidence suggests that ginkgo protects hippocampal neurons against cell death induced by beta amyloid. Now, that's kind of technical. What it means is that the memory areas of the brain, the nerves, don't get killed by free radicals generated in amyloid plaques because ginkgo biloba helps us. Here's another study, and this study says that ginkgo biloba leaf extract is the most widely sold phytomedicine in Europe, where it is used to treat Alzheimer's disease. What about America? No, it's really not recommended by doctors in America for Alzheimer's disease. Perhaps it should be. It may take 3 to 6 months to take effect. It has a slight encouraging of bleeding tendencies. So if you have some condition, nosebleeds or something, where bleeding tendencies would be bad, you would want to avoid this. But other than that, it really increases the circulation in the brain, so it could be a good thing. Now, this study I just threw in a couple weeks ago, thinking of you here tonight. And a 24-week randomized placebo-controlled double-blind study. Patients were all elders, and they had mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. Now, ginkgo improved memory as well as donepezil, which is a cholinergic drug. But without the nausea, vomiting occurs in 25% of patients typically, and nausea in all the patients, great restlessness. It's an awful drug. But the people who took ginkgo biloba had just as good results without any of those side effects. If I had an elder with this condition, I might consider this medicinal plant used all over the world with lots of studies, including this European Journal of Neurology 2006 study. Here's another plant. This grows in Hawaii, gotu kola. It's a well-known Ayurvedic herb with thousands of years of use. The study, and this one's from Phytotherapy Research Journal, found that gotu kola lowered amyloid beta in the hippocampus of the brain, the memory area of the brain. It also showed that it functioned as an antioxidant, reduced the free radical damage to membranes, and protected against DNA damage. This study was done with gotu kola tea and helped the rats go through mazes. It also showed that gotu kola increased 2 enzymes in the body that are used to reduce free radical damage, both glutathione and catalase. Now, here's a 6-month study that was reported in the European Journal of Scientific Research, and it showed that gotu kola capsules improved the average score of the mini-mentals exam from 25 to 28. Now, over a 6-month period, mild to moderate Alzheimer's patients would be expected to decrease 10%, not improve 10%. So we're looking at a significant change. We're looking at a treatment for Alzheimer's disease, at least a little, and I can find no side effects of gotu kola that seem to be detrimental. Now, it may contain small amounts of caffeine, but I can't confirm that. I have only one study so far showing that. It was interesting, though. It did have side effects. It lowered blood pressure and improved sleep. So the side effects were positive instead of negative. Kind of nice. Here's another placebo-controlled 60-day study that showed that gotu kola reduced the age-related decline in cognitive function in healthy middle-aged and elderly adults. And that was reported in the Journal of Nanomaterials and Biostructures in 2008. I love that name. One more medicinal plant to present to you. They did a placebo-controlled 22-week study, and they found that saffron extract worked as well as donepezil. Here's another plant that worked as well with no harmful side effects at all. This information, by the way, I know of no other researcher who is doing this. No one seems to look into the nutritional aspects of Alzheimer's disease. All of the medical studies are looking for that magic bullet that will cure Alzheimer's disease, but they're not looking at the dietary things that cause it or that might help it. And most studies in this country don't look at medical plants at all because they're not considered serious. So it looks like saffron may be helpful to Alzheimer's disease. The studies are not so solid as the other two plants. However, you could use it on rice and make saffron rice and lower your chances of Alzheimer's perhaps a bit. No bad side effects, except it's kind of expensive. Now I have 4 quick slides on exercise. Exercise does not halt the progression of Alzheimer's disease. Of course, how could it get those amyloid plaques out of your brain? Exercise slightly reduces the risk of Alzheimer's disease, maybe 25 to 33%, probably a vascular effect. We can counter cognitive impairment, but not Alzheimer's disease with aerobic exercise. Again, exercise helps with the vascular in the brain. It is good. I encourage everyone to exercise, absolutely. It's part of a good, healthy being. It makes you feel good. It's good for everything. It's not probably going to cure Alzheimer's disease, unfortunately. And the last study, just to show you how confusing it is, showed that moderate exercise reduced risk of Alzheimer's. However, mild and strong exercise did not. So we're not getting a real clear read on exercise. Everyone should do it. What about DHA? Who's heard of DHA in the crowd? Very, very well publicized thing. This is a 22 carbon chain fatty acid. It has 6 double bonds in it. It's extremely prone to rancidity. Now, this study was done, the 2 principal investigators hold patents in Martek, the biggest producer of algae-based DHA in the USA. So I would have expected this study to be skewed in such a way that they would make their DHA look good. But when I see a study like this that makes it look bad, I really listen. And they found that DHA did not improve cognition. It did not lower the risk of Alzheimer's disease. It was a very well-done study. And this is what's called a pivotal study. After this, it's going to be very difficult for anyone to say that it's helpful. Now, one of the problems is that Martek uses hexane to extract the oil from the algae. Hexane's a known neurotoxin for the brain, so this may be offsetting any effects. Another thing is that DHA is guaranteed to be rancid in any heating or storage fashion, so rancid DHA is not going to be helpful either with Alzheimer's disease or with cancer. For that matter, it'll probably raise your risk. Solvents, environmental solvents, increase your risk of Alzheimer's disease. And other possible risk, magnetic fields. Now, I see all of you clutching your cell phones out there. These studies were done with electrical workers and may or may not apply to people who hold their cell phones up to their heads all day. However, I think it is possible that cell phones will have an impact on the brain. Studies are coming out now about that. Mercury and lead, and of course, one of the really bizarre things is that the organophosphate pesticides have been found in workers exposed to them to double the chances of Alzheimer's disease. Then when they get it, the doctor gives them a very similar substance to treat it. These studies, these 4 excellent studies, show that aluminum does not increase the risk of Alzheimer's disease. These 3 even better studies show that aluminum does increase the risk of Alzheimer's disease. So, who's right? The fact is, aluminum is a neurotoxin. It creates tau tangles in the brain, whether or not they are identical to the tau tangles created by Alzheimer's disease. is really of no importance. No one should get any aluminum. It's bad for you. Okay, how do you get exposed to it? It really doesn't want to cross the blood-brain barrier at all. So if there's small amounts in drinking water, it probably wouldn't hurt you, although best not to be in there. And if you're cooking with aluminum pans, you probably won't forget who you are the next morning. But it's probably better not to cook with aluminum pans. The principal routes of exposure are antiperspirants that are sprayed, because they volatilize, get into the nasal passages, and are absorbed directly into the blood, into the brain. So this is probably a route of exposure you want to avoid. These studies are better because when they take brain samples for analysis, they use an aluminum-based fixative in the lab to fix them. And these studies here didn't take that into account. And these studies that found that Alzheimer's disease is increased with aluminum did take that into account. So I think there were better studies and more specific. So here's a summary of what I've talked about tonight. And I encourage you to use a holistic approach to your health every way that you can. Folate and B12 can cut your risk by 1/4. Dietary vitamin E can cut your risk by 1/2. If you were getting enough vitamin E and vitamin C, that could cut your risk down by 1/4 to down to 1/8 of your risk. And these are multiplicative. So for instance, if you had nuts and seeds every day and folate and B12, you could cut your risk down by 1/8. Well, that sounds pretty good to me. If you did everything on this page, except the bottom ones with the bombshells, then you could really cut your risk down dramatically. Grape juice and berries improve memory. Ginkgo and gotu kola both have been proven in many studies to help with memory problems and specifically with Alzheimer's disease. Exercise helps a little, DHA doesn't. AGEs were 2 to 3 times higher in Alzheimer's brains. If you can avoid them in food, if you're ever tempted to fry something, now frying vegetables isn't as bad in this case because AGEs won't be formed because of the content of water in the vegetables. If you're baking, only the crust will form AGEs, and they taste good. Now, this is not fair, but this is the case. If you're barbecuing steak, one of the many bad chemicals formed will be advanced glycation end products. But again, if you were to boil a steak, you would not have a problem with advanced glycation end products. Yes, of course, too much saturated fat and all that, and the animal wouldn't be too happy about it either. By the way, animal fat doubles your risk, and high blood cholesterol triples your risk. And I think everyone here knows that it's not a good idea to get exposed to smoke or pesticides. Well, I'm going to conclude my talk with that. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Steve Blake, for coming tonight and presenting us with this fascinating treasure trove of information. Hope to see you again next time. Mahalo. Good night, everybody.
This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.